Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. So I want you to answer this question honestly, and this is for folks like me who live in Canada, right? When you think about life in Canada, what do you really think about? Do you think about free healthcare? Do you think about Drake? Do you think about good food? Well, me too, I think about those things. But here's the thing. There's a version of life in Canada that TikTok and Instagram won't show you. It's a version that where you're making decent income, you're doing everything right, and you're still wondering where all your money went. Well, today I'm going to talk about that version. I'm going to talk about the real specific cost of living in Canada in 2026, and I'll show you the full picture that most people only discover after they've committed to a Canadian dream. Frankly, there is a Canadian dream. So I'll show you what you can actually do about it. So let's get into it. Now, before we get into details, let me give you some real numbers so you get a sense of what you're about to get into. According to StatScan, a single person in Canada needs about $3,300 to $3,800 per month just to cover their day-to-day basic expenses. And for a family of four, that number jumps to $5,900 to $6,400 per month. Now, think about this. Those numbers include basic things like rent, groceries, transportation, utilities, your phone bills, internet, personal care, and some decent entertainment. In Toronto, a basic two-bedroom apartment runs from $2,700 to $2,900 per month right now, and even $3,000 in some areas. Vancouver is quite similar to Toronto in that regard, but places like Ottawa, which is considered a mid-range city, sits around $2,200 to $2,400 per month for a two-bedroom apartment. Now, do the math. For a family of four in Toronto, you are at around $7,000 per month before you put a single dollar towards savings, emergencies, and anything that looks remotely like fun. And that's the reality that we're actually working with. The good news, and there is good news, is that Canada is not a single cost of living market. What does that mean? Where you live makes a big difference in your monthly cost. But first, I want to talk us through the three costs that catch most people off guard. First, let's talk about food. And I'm not talking about eating in restaurants or ordering takeout every single day. I'm talking about the groceries you need to feed yourself and your family every single week. The Canada Food Price Report, which is the most widely cited annual food forecast in the country, projects that food prices will rise 4 to 6% in 2026. Just think about how crazy that is. And for a family of four, that translates to around $17,571 on groceries this year. That's about $1,000 more than last year on the exact same meals. So you didn't eat more, you didn't upgrade your meals, you didn't change your diet, your bill just got bigger. And you're probably wondering, why is this happening, right? Well, the Bank of Canada has pointed out that most of Canada's food inflation is driven by rising import costs. And in simple English, what it means is Canada is importing a lot of food, especially fresh produce. Now, when the Canadian dollar is weaker than the US dollar, as it has been recently, it simply costs more Canadian dollars to buy the same imported goods. So if you then add the tariff tension that we currently have with the US, you are seeing temporary spikes in things like citrus products and avocados and other fresh products, right? And then you get a grocery bill that keeps going up regardless of whatever the grocery chain is doing. If you're also thinking about eating out, that's even more expensive. Restaurant prices have jumped 12.3% in January 2026 compared to the year before. And that's partly because of the GST holiday, which was a temporary tax measure that was introduced in 2024, where the federal sales tax on restaurant meals was waived to just give Canadians some breathing room. Now, when that GST holiday ended in early 2025, restaurant prices snapped back to what they were, and staffing costs also went up. So if you're feeling like your dining budget, your eating out budget is expensive, that's probably why. Now, pause for a second and think about this. In March 2025, Canadian food banks recorded 2.2 million visits in a single month. That is the highest number ever recorded in this country. And food bank usage has doubled since 2019. And the thing is, most people who use food banks are people who actually have jobs. Now, I'm not sharing that fact to alarm you or make you worried, but what I'm actually doing is to let you know that the grocery issue, the grocery crisis, affects more people than you actually think. But On the good side is, I'm going to give you 3 ways to reduce your grocery bills starting from this week. You can use loyalty points, things like PC Optimum, Sim Plus, or other points reward system that can probably save you around $30 to $60 a month with little effort. The second thing you can also do is to buy seasonal items. So fresh produce are cheaper in some months than in others. So it makes sense to stock up on those items when they're cheaper and freeze them until you need it. And the third thing, which I also do as well, meal plan for the week. So most food waste and impulse spending, they happen on the days when you really don't know what to eat. But when you plan your meals, you can plan ahead and cook in bulk. You've probably heard that Canadian housing is expensive, but 2026 is actually a more complicated story than what the news headlines might actually tell you. And whether you're renting or you own your own home, the implications are actually quite different. So let's get into renting first. If you're renting, there's a huge relief here. What we're actually seeing in the rental market is this. There's a huge supply of new housing that has hit the market, in addition to the recent changes in immigration policy. And what has happened as a consequence of that is Toronto has seen rents drop around 12% from the record peaks in 2022. Vancouver also has seen their highest ever years of condo completion, which is pushing more units into the rental pool. And with more supply, the demand for rental apartments are also gone down, and then the prices have also gone down. Now, in some buildings, interestingly, landlords are offering the first 3 months free, which is something that wouldn't have happened like 3 years ago. So the good news is, if you're apartment hunting right now, you have more leverage, you have more bargaining power than you had in previous years. So if you own a house, especially one with a mortgage, right, the picture is slightly tougher than those who are renting, and I'll show you why. In Canada, unlike what you have in the US, most mortgages don't lock you in for 25 to 30 years. And the typical Canadian mortgage has a fixed rate of only 3 to 5 years, after which you must renew at whatever rate that is available at that time. Now, during the pandemic, if you remember what happened during the pandemic years of 2020 and 2021, interest rates on mortgages were at a historic lows, and some owners locked in mortgages at under 2%. Well, 2026, those rates are long gone. And what's happening is the Bank of Canada has estimated that around 60% of all outstanding mortgages will have been renewed today at considerably higher rates. And for most families, that means extra hundreds of dollars every single month on the same house that they've been living in. Now, whether you rent or whether you own, insurance is also going up. So according to StatsCan, home insurance rose 6.8% and auto insurance rose 7.3% in late 2025. And both of these things are expected to keep climbing in 2026. Now, the takeaway here is your housing costs are not just one number. Your housing costs are rent, mortgage, insurance, utilities, maintenance, and even in some places of Toronto, water rate increases. Now, these layers of extra cost, they compound quietly, and that's why most people feel the pinch without really knowing what the single cost of that increase is. I want to talk about an area most personal finance content ignore, and that is an area where budgets quietly fail. So you have utilities. Energy costs vary a lot by province, but the direction is really the same everywhere. Now, in British Columbia, BC Hydro has increased household bills by $3.75 per month in 2026 alone. In Ontario, electricity is priced on a time of use system, meaning the rates you pay, it varies at different times of the day. And the cost has been steadily rising with carbon prices and grid maintenance fees. The average GTA household now spends more on energy than it did before the pandemic. So no single line item you'll see will break your wallet, but the combination of things like utilities, internet, and your phone bills could easily run you around $400 to $600 per month for a household. And some budgets really underestimate the impact of these 3 items I just mentioned. If you have young children, listen very closely, because this might be the single biggest number that surprises newcomers in Canada. The federal government has a national program aimed at making childcare costs around $10 per day across the entire country. But the reality is each province is at a different stage of implementing this policy. And here's where things stand right now. In Quebec, it costs around $9.6. per day. Essentially, they've reached that $10 per day goal. Alberta, on the other hand, has capped childcare costs at $326 per month per child. And this makes it a bit more predictable and affordable to raise children. In Ontario, that number sits around like $19 per day, and it comes around $380 to $400 per month per child. But it's below market rate, but it's still not at the $10 per day target. BC, on the other hand, has not reached that target. So the market rate in BC is around $31 per day per child. Now, if you have a family with 2 kids in Vancouver, childcare cost alone can run you around $1,300 per month. And that's like making a second rent payment. If that family were in Quebec, that number will be under like $400. So province by province, childcare policy is one of the biggest hidden financial differentiators in Canada. Outside of Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver, Canada is mostly a car-dependent country. So if you need a vehicle, and most Canadians actually do, you need to budget around $700 to $900 per month for insurance, for fuel, for maintenance. And that's not even talking about the cost of financing the car. That's just keeping the car running. If you're lucky enough to be in a city that has a solid transit system, monthly passes will range from, say, $90, like you have in Montreal, to $138 in Ottawa, which means you need to consider a car as a near fixed expense and you literally have nowhere to hide. So let's do a quick reality check. For a working family of 4 in Ontario who live outside of Toronto, owning a car and renting a 2-bedroom apartment, these are the kind of costs you would likely expect. Rent will likely come in at $2,000, groceries around $1,400 to $1,500, utilities, phone and internet around like $500 a month, your car expenses, let's say $800 a month, childcare for one child around $390 to $450 a month, and miscellaneous expenses, let's say around like $400 a month. That's roughly like $5,500 a month before you consider debt payments, savings, or emergencies. Now, if you are on an $80,000 household income, your take-home pay is likely around $6,000 per month, and you're essentially living paycheck to paycheck based on these expenses without doing anything extravagant. So by now, you've probably noticed one thing running through everything. Where you live is one of the most important decisions you will ever make in Canada. So I'm going to show you like a side-by-side comparison of for a family of 4 renting a 2-bedroom apartment with all costs included. In Toronto, that's going to come to around $8,000 to $10,000 a month because of the higher average rent in the GTA, and there's no provincial sales tax offset in Toronto. Vancouver is going to come to around $8,000 to $9,500 a month. That's because of the high childcare cost and the high home prices. In places like Ottawa, it's going to be around $6,500 to $7,500 a month because it's a mid-range city and they have a solid transit system. In a place like Calgary, it's going to be around $6,000 to $7,000 a month because they don't pay provincial taxes and the childcare cost is also cheaper. But in Montreal, it's like $5,500 a month because the rent is lower and childcare costs are also cheaper. So you can see the differences. So in a place like Calgary and Toronto, the difference is not even a small amount. The difference is literally the difference between building savings and barely surviving. And in Montreal, there's the combination of lower rent and subsidized childcare. So it's something that people underrate, and it's also a huge benefit for young families where the income is a bit tight. Now, in Alberta, where there's no provincial sales tax, it means you're literally saving money on everything you spend on compared to a place like Ontario or BC. And that could come up to literally hundreds of dollars every year. But I'm not saying everybody should move to Calgary or Montreal. I also know that you need to consider things like jobs, family roots, and community, right? But if you have the flexibility, running the numbers on where you live is one of the highest leverage financial decisions that is really available to you. So think about that before you choose where to live. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground. Now, let me highlight 4 things that are actually in your control, things you can actually influence that would reduce your costs. Number 1, build a true cost budget, not a vague, wishful budget. And here's why. Most people budget for 3 things. They budget for rent, they budget for groceries, and their phone. But the real budget include things like insurance, utilities, childcare, transit, subscriptions, and even like an emergency buffer. And what we've come to see is the gap between what people think they spend and what they actually spend is often around $500 to $1,000 per month. So you need to start tracking everything you spend for 30 days. And some of these bank apps also help you track where your money is going to, so you can leverage on that to draw up a budget. Secondly, check what government support you are entitled to. In January 2026, the government launched the Canada Groceries and Essentials Benefit, which is a new program designed to help lower and moderate income Canadians cope with the rising food and living costs. Also check into childcare benefits, GST, HST credits, provincial programs. And it's interesting to know that some people leave money on the table simply because they don't know what program they are eligible to apply for. Don't be one of those people. The third thing you can do is to put your money somewhere they can grow. With housing expenses rising faster than what wages can do, having a savings account where your money is earning just 2% is actually just a waste of time because your money is literally not growing. Canada has two of the best tax sheltered accounts in the world, which is the TFSC and the RRSP. And you can simply make regular contributions into a low-cost ETF. And I talked about that in my previous video. So if you've not seen that, go check that one. The fourth thing you can also do is run the numbers on where you live. If you work hybrid or remote, the differences in where you live can save you as much as $3,000 a month for a family of four. Now, that's real money that you can put towards a retirement, you can put towards your kids' education, or you can simply use that money to live a less stressful life. Canada is still a great place to live. Don't get scared by anything. We have universal healthcare, we have relatively safe cities, we have some social programs, right? But these things have real economic value, even when they are hard to put a direct dollar on each of them. But the cost of living here in 2026 is real, and it hits harder than most people even plan for. What I wanted to get from this video is to make sure that you have a budget that actually reflects the life that you live in and reflect the life that you really want to live. So if this has helped you in any way, do well to share it with someone who's wondering why their paycheck never seems to be enough. I make videos like this every single week, so subscribe for more great content, and I'll see you on the next one.